left the studio, as they say, I felt like, you know what? I didn't have to crap on his idea, like publicly.
I don't
Like,
mind.
yeah, he was thinking. He was actually planning. I was just trying to see if I could fit in a nap on Friday afternoon, and he was like actually like and so as Friday unfolded and Saturday unfolded, and as you predicted, nothing happened outside of the stuff at Houston. I was like, well, we do need something to talk about on Sunday night outside of Legos and our kids and Marcus Sasser. And so I said, here's what we'll do. We will both come up with a top 10 stories in college basketball in the year 2021, calendar year 2021, and we'll compare our lists and see how much we have in common and see which one of us forgot something that seems obvious once it's pointed out. So we're going to do that next, but first, check this out. So 2021, the year, is just about in the books. If I got my calendar correct, we got after today, we got 5 days left in the year. And I looked at the college basketball schedule, and there ain't really much going on. Like, there's no high-profile game left in the year 2021, and even the best games will probably get canceled because that's where we're at now. So I feel like whatever we come up, like, I don't think anything that's going to happen in the next 5 days is ever going to break this list of the top 10 things in college basketball that happened in 2021. So as I was sitting here on the day after Christmas, I just started brainstorming, just put boom, 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 just bullet pointing. Here's one. And then I went back through my entire list and I ranked them 1 to 10, what I think were the most interesting, best, memorable, important, however you want to do it, things that happened in college basketball in 2021. I got my list of 10. You told me you got your list of 10.
Yes.
So let's just start at the top. And then if we both have it, say where you got it on your list. We'll cancel that. We'll move on.
All right. Before we get this going, a couple things here. As we do this, anyone watching live on YouTube, if you've got...
Hey, YouTube.
Hi, YouTube.
Hey,
if
YouTube.
You have got what we are not covering here, because there's just too much. Two things, actually. One, if you have a particular memory from the podcast that has stuck with you for 2 months or 7 months or 11 months, and you want to chat with others or remind people, feel free to do that. And maybe as we get along and later in the podcast, Ncaa will throw a few of your comments on the screen to remind people, because there has been some ridiculousness. And on that note, if you are not already subscribed to the YouTube channel, which many of you are, continue to do so, because Ncaa has produced a best of 21 video only version that's not going to be in the podcast feed. It's only going to be on YouTube. Parrish and I have both watched a rough cut of it, and we've only been on video for 2 months, but there were even things that we just did like 6 weeks ago that I forgot that we did, and it was very entertaining. Ncaa's doing an amazing job. Ncaa, you are the man. So I encourage discussion with all that. As we get going, how many of these do you think we will have shared in our top 10?
6.
I'm going to say 7. But I've got one of mine. I think you're going to be like, this doesn't. It should be qualifying somewhere else, and it's number 10. Do you want me to go first with my number 10?
Oh, we're going to count. I think let's start at the top. Number 1.
You want to go 1 to? Why? We're counting down. End of the year. Count down.
No, I think we count up, because the things we're going to have most in common are going to be the ones at the top. So let's cancel them out. And then the most interesting thing, boy, we should have talked about this before we started. The most interesting
anticlimactic. Why would we not count down?
Well, Jesus Christ. Everybody knows what like number 1 and number 2 and number 3 are going to be. Like they're going to be obvious by the time we get there, I think.
I don't think I bet there's a possibility our number 1's the same. I don't think our number 1 will be the same.
Okay. However you want to do it, Deadleg.
No, we'll do it. Let's start at number 1.
No, let's start at number 10. Okay, you ready for my number 10?
Go ahead.
My number 10. Tell me if it's on your list. Mark Turgeon resigned from Maryland after 8 games this season.
It's not on my top 10. As I do every year for the court report, I also have this list in wider form, and this is a rough look. So Turgeon is on my list, but right now I have Turgeon stepping down from Maryland at number 19 on my list.
I had it at 10. What's 10 on your list?
10 on my list, because again, at the time, this was the big story before we got to the tournament, was the Gonzaga versus Baylor, number 1 versus number 2. Who's going to be better? They were by far that we talked about it on 9 podcasts minimally. These two teams are so far removed from everyone else in adjusted efficiency margin. So it was the January, February until Baylor paused Gonzaga, Baylor, 2 best teams by far in college basketball. To me, that was a top 10 storyline in the sport in the year 2021. I am not including the title game in this storyline.
Well, I mean, I obviously have a Baylor item. And on my list of things, I had Gonzaga enters the title game undefeated. But with the way the title game went, I don't think that matters that much anymore. And so I did not put it in my top 10.
Okay. I did. Okay.
What's so funny? What's so funny about that?
No, I did. I'm saying I did. I'm saying it's funny that I did and you didn't. So I thought for sure you'd have that in there.
I had it in the list, and it's literally it looks like the way I organize this, it would be number 11. I was just like, Gonzaga making the title game undefeated. After you get blasted in the title game, you still don't have a national championship. I'm just going to leave that out.
I'm so glad we decided to do it this way. Okay.
Okay. Here's my number 9. Ucla Garza goes from a preseason national player of the year who becomes the national player of the year, and it was announced in his final home game that his jersey will be retired. I thought all of that was pretty cool.
Not on my list.
What the? He's the national player of the year. Ucla Garzilla.
I know. I have Luca will factor into one of my stories, but not. He's a little sidebar. I'm not saying it's not valid. It is. This is why I wanted to do it this way because I need.
Sorry, Luca. You had an amazing year. An amazing career. You're just a little sidebar, according to Deadleg.
I'm wondering if my number 9, I think should be on your list, but I think it won't be. You ready?
Let's. Don't make me wait any longer.
Okay. John Chaney dies at 89 years old.
I tried to think about people who died. I couldn't think of anybody, but you're right. John Chaney did.
Chaney dying, I think, is a top 10 headline for what he stood for and how influential he was in the game. That happened on January 29th. And I had that as I was just compiling all these. I had it like sitting there unintentionally at like 12 or 13. I'm like, no. John Chaney dying is a top 10 headline this year. So that's my number 9.
I didn't have it, but I do not object. Here's my number 8. Now, like this has got a lot of stuff in it, but it's all connected.
Okay.
And just anything you got that connects to this, we'll call it those that's a match. Texas wins the Big 12 tournament, then loses to Abilene Christian in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Then Shaka Smart takes Marquette, which opens Texas for Chris Beard.
Okay.
All of that's connected.
Yeah. So that
Shaka wins the Big 12 tournament. It's like, ooh, Shaka's safe. He's off the hot seat. Boom, loses to Abilene Christian. It's like, ooh, is he going to end up on the hot seat? Shaka's like, double birds. I ain't ending up on no hot seat again. I'm going to Marquette. And then Chris Beard is like, holy cow, Texas opened up. I guess I'll move across the state.
Right. Big one for sure. I've got one that didn't make the list, but I'm going to wait just in case you include it in another way in it. And I've got another one where it kind of, you'll know what I'm saying when I bring it up, but that is definitely in there. I just have that exact thing tied to other things. That's all. 2021, man. Wild year. By the way, I have a fun trivia game coming. Not trivia time, just trivia game coming after we get all this. Number 8. I kind of felt I was going to get to you before this one. I got to figure this is on your list. At number 8, I have Roy Williams announcing his retirement on April 1st. On that day, Texas also hired Chris Beard. And so, Roy Williams is the number 8, but by the way, Beard getting to Texas, which in a normal year might be the biggest hiring you could get, was a bit overshadowed. Do you have Roy retiring in your top 10?
It's in my top 3.
Top 3?
It's Roy Williams.
Okay.
The 3-time national champion, Naismith Memorial Hall of Famer. He retires. It's a big time story.
It is a big time story. I could be undervaluing it.
Yeah. Roy Williams. Williams were walking away from the sport in a somewhat surprising way, like in the sense that, we didn't have a podcast a week earlier talking about, you think Roy's done? Nobody did. I had Roy at 3. So that's one we'll be able to skip when we get to close to the top of mine. Okay, my number 7. Mick Cronin, greatest coach in UCLA history, takes the Bruins from the first 4 to the Final 4.
This is my number 3. Tell me if you would include this in yours. My number 3 biggest story of the year is Gonzaga beats UCLA 93-90 in overtime in one of the 3 to 5 best games in NCAA tournament history, and UCLA is making the Final Four in doing so. Lump them together?
I mean, you can if you want to.
Do you have the Gonzaga one separately?
No, I mean, no. I mean, that was the game of the year.
Highest rated non-football broadcast in 2021 was that game. So to me, that's a top 3 story.
I feel like Gonzaga, UCLA, that whole moment, that game, it's all tied to UCLA going from the first four to the Final Four. It's all under the same umbrella.
Okay, then we would generally agree. I have that number 3 on my list is Gonzaga, Suggs, 37-footer, overtime, best game of the tournament, best game in decades. That's my number 3.
Okay, what's your number 7?
My number 7 is attached to the men's tournament, but is actually the women's NCAA tournament's inequities kind of up against the men's tournament.
Oh, somebody's trying to make sure the eye on college basketball is Title IX compliant.
This was a situation where, it became huge news. Technically more women's basketball than men's, but when it was, compared against the men versus the women, I think that is fair to say that is a top 10 story in college basketball this season, and led to some changes, some of them necessary, perhaps some of them to be determined if they're going to happen or not. Like, are we going to have Final Fours for men's and women's NCAA tournaments in the same city? They're still talking about that. We've talked about that on previous podcasts over the summer. But that was my number 7. I figured that wasn't going to make your top 10. But I think, I had to go and talk on, we've got CBS Sports HQ streaming for the sports side. I had to go talk on the CBS News streaming platform about that twice. It was just a big deal. When that kind of stuff happens, which is also the case with my next one, that usually indicates to me it's a pretty big story.
Fine with me.
Okay.
Nowhere on my list. Not in my alternatives. Not in my top 10. Not in my. But maybe I should include this. Didn't get anywhere on there.
Okay.
My number 6.
Mm-hmm.
Both Miller brothers lose their jobs. Sean at Arizona, Archie at Indiana.
Not on my top 10. I don't think you're going to have what I have at 11 being there. So this is what I had. I said 5 of the top 10 jobs in college basketball changed in what was the noisiest coaching carousel in men's hoops most consequential we've ever seen, basically. So that was my number 11, which would include both Miller brothers losing their jobs.
Yeah, I mean when you think about where they were just a few years earlier, it's 2 guys who were both coaching in the Elite 8 in the same year. Neither one of them advanced further than that, but still 2 brothers both coaching in the Elite 8, and then Archie's considered the best mid-major coach in America. I don't mean to describe him. That's what I mean. Best coach at a mid-major in America. And that's how you end up with the Indiana job. And Sean had Arizona, operating at the tip top of the sport. And then one gets undone by scandal, the other undone by a lack of success relative to the expectations. And now I don't know. You go back 6 years and say Sean Miller and Archie Miller both out of coaching in December 2021. You're like, what? But that's where we're at. That's a big story.
Number 6 for me ties 2 headlines within a 10-day period together. June 21st, the Supreme Court rules 9-0 against the NCAA in the Alston case, which was not about paying players, but it was more about player rights and student athlete rights and what they should be entitled to, just like every other regular student. That sets the tone for July 1st, when the NCAA officially allowed name, image, and likeness rules to be on the books. Technically temporary rules that are still out there. This is still an emergency allowance by the NCAA, but it's the schools and the conferences dictating. It obviously changes college sports forever. Quite important. Almost put this higher, but I just didn't. So that is number 6. Is that or anything about that anywhere on your list?
No, but it should be.
Yeah.
I was thinking strictly basketball stuff. Mm-hmm. And that just sort of, that's a place where I had a blind spot. If you and I were putting together a list for CBSSports.com and we were, going to work on it together, you'd be like, hey, where do we put name, image, and likeness? I'd be like, I'm glad you thought of that. Yeah, that's one where I just had a blind. I was thinking solely about basketball stuff, but there's no denying name, image, and likeness is maybe the biggest story.
It could be. I feel like the other ones, yeah, you're right. It could be. I might even have it 1 or 2 spots a little low, but once I got to 6, it got a little bit tough. All right, top half. We've only knocked off each other like once or twice here, so I assume we might have some duplication here. What do you got at 5?
Kentucky had a historically bad 9-16 season.
Not in my top 10.
It is one of the biggest stories of 2021 that they sucked so bad that Kentucky fans were like, I don't know if this John Calipari guy is the right guy for the job.
It is big. I have it right now, like roughly. I haven't sorted out the whole thing. I have it at 13 on my overall list, but yes, it's out there. Yes. My number 5 is what we've been talking about this week, because I think it has been significant enough in the past 10 days. The Omicron variant puts college basketball season into chaos once more. I mean, we are losing games now at a rate not quite last season, but you can see what it's done to all of American sports, and it's a small part of why we're even talking about what we're talking about right now, because there's not much else to talk about, period, and we're losing games there. We're probably gonna, this podcast, every single one for the past 5 or 6 has had to invoke it in some sort of way, and it probably will for the next 3 or 4 weeks. There will probably be something related to college basketball touched and impacted by specifically the Omicron variant that I felt it had become a top 5 story in college basketball this year, because it's also become a top 5 story in every single major American sport that you can think of.
Yeah. So my number 4, this is actually sets up well, is it's pandemic related. It's the only pandemic related thing I have. We concluded a season, and I guess I would just add on to this, but what I typed was we concluded a season in the middle of the dumbest pandemic of my lifetime, with the entire NCAA tournament being held in the state of Indiana. And then to add on to that, and then, by the way, the start of the following season featured one cancellation after another that most people did not envision, because, we got through an NFL. Like, we've been through things since vaccines became available with very little issues. Like, we got through baseball season, and we were getting through the NBA season, and we were getting through the NFL season, and we largely got through college football without issues. And then boom, Omicron came around. Isn't that messing around? It ain't no joke. Like, I know it is mild. At least the early data suggested it's mild relative to Delta variant. Like, if somebody asks you, if you bump into somebody on the corner and they're like, yo, you want Delta or you want Omicron? Take Omicron every time. Take Omicron. You want Omicron. But this is something I was trying to explain to somebody else. Just because there's some arguments out there. Like, listen, nobody's really getting that sick from Omicron. So, let's just play games with Omicron. And the truth is, whether you think that's right or wrong, you guys can go fight about that on a message board somewhere. It's just that, sports have largely made it clear, if somebody pops positive for something under the COVID umbrella, whatever variant, they're not playing. Period. End of story. Now, we might look back in 5 years and be doing it differently. I mean, in 5 years from now, and then we might be living on a planet where, they're not even testing for COVID anymore. If you feel well enough to play, go play. And if you don't. But that's not where we're at right now. And let me back up. I don't mean to suggest that's where we're going to be or where I think we should be. I have no idea. I'm just saying we might be there someday. My point is, we're not there now. And so if you pop positive now, you're just not playing. That's the way all sports are operating.
This is my number 1 story. Going back to what I mentioned before with having to go on like CBS News, I was on twice a week minimum for 3 straight weeks, because the idea that the NCAA tournament was happening at a single site had never happened before. It was the largest logistical non-Olympic undertaking, as far as I could tell, and this also having spoke with NCAA people and organizers and people that are even outside the NCAA. It was the most logistically difficult thing that's ever been done in American sports that wasn't like putting together an Olympics, and maybe even more tough logistically when you considered it was in a quasi bubble, everything that went into it. To me, holding the NCAA tournament in Indianapolis under those circumstances, single site, was the biggest story, because also it was 3-week long kind of thing. So within that's where I've got side stories like Oral Roberts, first 15 seed to get to the Sweet 16 since Dunk City did it 9 years ago. I had the Abilene Christian deal in there, which sets off this chain of events where Beard goes to Texas, and then Shaka's at Marquette. Porter Moser, they get to the Sweet 16, so he winds up being at Oklahoma. Oregon State makes the Elite Eight out of nowhere. Beaver Fever, hello. UCLA makes the Final Four. So all that kind of encapsulated in. But the big story for me, that was my number one. What is yours? Fourth, I believe, was number one. I thought for the NCAA to pull that off, and oh, by the way, in a 68-team tournament, you play 67 games. Normally, there were only 66 played because VCU had a no contest, which allowed Oregon to move on, I believe memory serves. Yes, that is number one on my list.
Okay, so we still don't know your number 4, do we?
We do not.
We'll announce it, I guess. Otherwise, this is going to get real awkward.
All right. Number 4 is Gonzaga beats UCLA in overtime. So I guess we know it. So number 4 is that. And then do you want to give your 3 or?
Well, my 3 was Roy Williams retired. So we're on to you.
Okay. My 3 is the news of Mike Krzyzewski's retirement in the year 2022 comes in. If he had actually retired, I would put it 1, but he's retiring next year. The news itself is a significant, major headline. And I'll never forget being at my son's pre-K school, getting a call from one of our HQ producers, and the first words were, Coach K's retiring. And I said, like, today? And they said, no, announced, it's happening next year. I was like, okay, this is still huge, but there's a major difference. If he's literally retiring today, then yes, I might have to leave my son at school. So yes, the news of Mike Krzyzewski's retirement for me is the number 3 story in 2021.
Well, that's what I had at number 2. Coach K announces his upcoming retirement from the sport in which he is widely considered the GOAT.
Agreed. Okay. And 3 was Roy Williams?
Yeah. So number 1 for me. I mean,
I got to give you my 2. I didn't give you number 2 for me. My last one.
Give me a number 2.
You want number 2? For me, the number 2 headline is Gonzaga goes into the national title game, one of the 10 or 11 teams in history with an undefeated record, and Baylor wins its first national championship ever in dominant fashion under Scott Drew. And so it's everything tied to that. Gonzaga, if it had gone undefeated, you could really argue if it had done that, it's even bigger, and it is. It's bigger than the tournament in Indy, I think.
Gonzaga being the first undefeated national champion since '76 Indiana would have been the biggest story in 2021.
Yes.